One might argue that if nobody had put a cup of firewine into Sorrel's hand that night, she would never have climbed onto the feast table and informed 400 wolves that the calling was a fraud. But then again, if the calling had not made a fool of her 15 times in a row, she would never have needed the wine. So really, the whole thing was the right's fault, all of it. Sorrel was the keeper of the rolls at Ashcairn. Every year, on the coldest night of the year, she sat at the low desk beneath the great arch, and wrote down the name of every wolf that came, and when the last of them had been written, she closed the book, and the hall applauded the new wolves, and nobody looked at her at all. She was 26 years old, and she had knelt at that stone 15 times. 15 times the right master had laid his palm on her brow and spoken the words that call a wolf up out of the dark of a person, and 15 times nothing whatsoever had happened. No heat, no turning. No second heartbeat rising to meet her own, only the cold of the stone under her knees, and the sound of 400 people breathing very quietly, the way people breathe when they are watching something go badly. This year had been the last. The law allowed a wolf to be called until the 26th winter, and after that the rolls recorded a person as hollow, and the matter was closed. So she had knelt, and Corwin had helped her up himself, and murmured that she was still the finest woman in the mountain, and then he had blessed the new wolves, and the hall had roared for them, and Sorrel had gone back to her desk and written down their names. She had written every single one. Then she went to the feast, and somebody put a cup in her hand, and she discovered, somewhere around the fourth one, that the world went softer at the edges, and that she had opinions. "It is a story," she announced. She was standing on the table. She was not entirely certain how she had come to be standing on the table, but the view was excellent and the acoustics were superb. "The calling is a story we tell ourselves. A man in a gray robe puts his hand on your head and says, 'A poem. If your wolf comes, we all agree the poem did it. And if your wolf does not come, we all agree that you did it, that there is a hole in you, that you are hollow.'" She gestured with the cup. "Nobody ever asks whether the poem is any good." "Strong words," said a dry voice, quite close. She turned. She had not noticed him sit down. A big man in a traveling cloak, hood up despite the heat of the fires, a cup of dark ale in front of him that he had not touched. She could see only the lower half of his face and the suggestion of a smile on it, and she disliked it immediately. "Not strong," she said. "True. They say the king came into his wolf at 11, said the stranger, roaring. "Cracked a beam. It is a very popular story. It is a very popular story, and I have written down every popular story in this mountain with my own hand, and they all belong to the same 40 families. She leaned toward him and nearly went off the edge of the table. "Do you know how many stable hands have come into their wolf in the last 10 years? 2. And how many sons of the high houses? Every single one. Not one of them hollow." She straightened. Either the blood of the great houses is a marvel, or the man saying the poem knows perfectly well who is watching. The stranger went very still. "That is a dangerous thought," he said. "It is an arithmetical one." "You would say that to the king's face, would you?" "I would say worse. I would tell him he has never once sat at a desk and written down another person's name and felt nothing. That he has never had a whole hall hold its breath and pity him. He does not know how the rest of us live, and he does not care to, and if he stood in this room right now, I would tell him so, and I would not lower my voice to do it." The hall had begun, very quietly, to go wrong. She did not notice. She was watching the stranger reach up, unhurried, and push back his hood. Her first thought, drunk and instant and entirely traitorous, was that it was not fair, because she knew that face. It was on the seal she pressed into the wax, and on the great carving over the arch she walked beneath every day of her life. And what every last carver had missed was the mouth, already curving into something slow and certain, and the eyes, gray and far too sharp for the easy face they sat in. Lucan, Alpha, King of Vero, who was not due at Ashcairn for another 3 days. Lucan, he said pleasantly, as though they were being introduced at a wedding. And you are? The laughter went out of the room the way water goes out of a cracked basin. He rose the way water rises, without effort, and the whole hall came up off its benches and knelt, 400 of them all at once. And Sorrel was left standing on the table above them, with a cup in her hand, and her heart going like a bird in a sack. "Come down," he said quietly. She came down. Her legs did it without asking her. "You knelt tonight," he said. And nothing came. Nothing has ever come. Her chin came up. It was the last thing she had. "I am hollow, Majesty. It is written in my own hand, in your own book. I wrote it neatly." And then the strangest thing. The King of Vero leaned in, close enough that she felt the warmth coming off him, and he breathed in once, slowly. The way a man tastes a wine he has been told is worthless. And he went absolutely still. Something moved through his face then, so fast that only she was near enough to see it, and it was not amusement, and it was not pity. It was a great deal closer to alarm. "Silence," he said not loudly. The hall had already been silent. It got worse. He looked out over 400 kneeling wolves, and over the right master frozen at the high table with his hands flat on the wood, and he opened his mouth to tell them what he had found. And inside Sorrel, for the first time in 26 years, something turned over. It came up out of the dark, beneath her ribs, like a great animal rolling onto its feet in a cave, and it was enormous, and it was awake, and it was hers. Her cup hit the floor. The hall went sideways. The fire swung up and around, and the arch tilted, and Sorrel of Ashcairn, keeper of the rolls, hollow, went down into the rushes without hearing one single word of what her king said about her. Sorrel woke with the absolute conviction that she had died in the night, that the next world had arrived, and that the next world was extremely bright. Then the fifth bell rang below, and she understood with a sinking heart that she was not dead at all, and that the day was going to have to be got through. The night came back in pieces that did not fit. Her own voice, very loud, very certain, making excellent points. A cup. A great many cups. A low voice, dry and amused at her, gray eyes, and a heat that had come up through her so hard and so fast that it had put her on the floor. "She lives," said Nev from the doorway, with Bram behind her. "I drank too much," said Sorrel, sitting up, "and the room did something unforgivable. I made a fool of myself. It will not happen again." The admission cost her more than she let them see. She waited for them to mock her because she had earned it. Nobody laughed. "You truly do not remember," said Nev. "I remember enough to be ashamed of. That is the end of it." "It is really not," said Bram, and then, with terrible forced brightness, "But it will be fine. He is not going to take a word of it seriously, not from a woman that far into a cup. Worst case, they take her post." "Bram," said Nev. Sorrel looked between them. Her mouth had gone dry. "What is everyone talking about? You climbed onto the feast table. You told the hall that the calling was a story. Then you told them the right master picks who gets a wolf and who does not, and you did the arithmetic out loud. And then you said you would say worse to the king's face. And then," said Bram, "you did. The loft was very quiet." "No," said Sorrel to the memory rather than to Bram. But it was there now, and it would not go. The hood pushed back by an unhurried hand. The gray eyes. She had called the Alpha King of Vero, a man who did not know how the rest of them lived, and she had told him so, with a cup in her hand and her boots in the dinner. What did he say? She said. Nev and Bram looked at each other. "That," said Neve slowly, "is the thing." He cleared the hall. Bram had gone pale in a way she did not like at all. "You went down, and he caught you, and then he cleared the hall. 400 of us, out of our own feast, in the time it takes to lace a boot. Not one word of argument, and the doors shut." "Who stayed?" said Sorrel. "Nobody," said Nave. She paused. "Only the king, and the right master." Because a king who lets a drunk clerk mock the blood in front of 400 witnesses invites the next mockery. He could take her post. He could take her name off the rolls and burn the page. He could put her out of the mountain and into the waste, with no wolf and no coat, and not one soul in Vero would say a word against it. She was still telling herself that the worst of it was losing her post when the door banged open. Sorrel, a runner, out of breath. "The right master wants you now." She went down through the cold stone corridors with her heart in her throat, sick with dread the entire way, because Corwin never summoned anybody. Corwin had pulled her out of the snow when she was 9 years old and half dead and nobody's child. Corwin had taught her letters. Corwin had put the first pen into her hand and told her that a woman who can write is never truly powerless. He had knelt beside her after every failed, calling all 15 of them, and he had never once looked at her with pity, and that was the only reason she had survived any of it. And last night, she had stood on a table and told 400 people that he chose, who got a wolf. She knocked. Her knuckles did not sound like her own. "Come," he said. "Tell me the mountain has it wrong," he said. "Tell me you did not." "Sir," her voice came out very small. "I can explain, then." "Explain to me," said Corwin, "why the King of Vero spent an hour last night asking me about you." And then at last he turned, and Sorrel, who had seen this man talk a mad wolf back down into a boy, looked at his face and understood that Corwin was afraid. "Sit down, child," he said, and crossed to the table and poured a cup from the jug. He kept there the bitter green one, the tonic he had been making for her since she was 9 years old, for her nerves. "Drink this. You are shaking." She sat and drank, and beneath them, down through the floor and the stone, and the 17 years, the great gate horn of Ashcairn began to sound. "That is an arrival," he said, very low, "and no one cleared it with me." Sorrel watched something impossible arrive behind his eyes at the very moment it arrived behind her own, because there was only one person in the whole of Vero who could bring a horn up at Ashcairn without a word to its right master. The footsteps stopped outside the door. The king was not coming, the king was here. The door opened and the Alpha King of Vero walked into the little gray room, and the room changed. The hooded man at the feast had let her forget what he was. This one let nobody forget anything. Drunk, she had told him he did not know how the rest of them lived. Standing here, entirely sober, she understood that she had been very, very stupid. "Ha," said Lucan, with an expression of the deepest satisfaction. "There she is, my clerk." Sorrel's stomach dropped. He had not come to arrest her. He had come for sport, and he was going to do it in front of the one man whose good opinion she still had. "Your Majesty," said Corwin, and bowed low. "Forgive me. My keeper was gravely in her cups last night, which is a failure of my house and not of hers. If there is discipline owed, let it be mine to give, and let it be quiet, and let it be done today." "Discipline," he said, delighted. "Right, master. You cannot possibly mean to discipline the woman I intend to marry." The fire cracked. Nobody else made any sound at all. "Your Majesty," Corwin tried. "I have thought about it a great deal," Lucan went on, "and I find I am in earnest, which is inconvenient for everybody. My council will be furious. It will be marvelous. Majesty, please." Corwin's voice had gone hoarse. "Sorrel is a good woman, and she has had a hard life, and I will not have her made a joke of, king or no king." And that very nearly broke her, because he had said it to the Alpha King of Vero with his chin up, at the risk of his own throat, and he had said it for her. "A joke," said Lucan. He turned to Sorrel, and all the play went out of his face, and what was left was steady and direct, and did not blink. "Keep her. How many times have you knelt at that stone?" 15, Majesty." Her throat closed hollow. "Yes," he nodded slowly. "That is what I thought they wrote." He crossed to the window and spoke to the glass, in the mild and pleasant voice of a man discussing the weather. "I have scented every wolf in this kingdom. Every one. That is what an alpha is for. I walk into a room, and I know what is in it, and what it can do, and I have never once been wrong. I am not being modest, right, master? I am telling you it is the single thing I am for. He turned around, and last night I put my nose an inch from that woman's throat, he said, and I could not read her at all. Sorrel stared at him. She is not hollow, said the king of Vero. She is the only person in my kingdom whose bottom I cannot see. I do not intend to leave this mountain until I know what is standing down there, and I am not fool enough to leave her here unguarded while I find out. So she will be my intended, and she will be under my hand. And the law that says a hollow woman may be put out into the waste for denying the blood will find it has nothing whatsoever to prosecute. Because she denied nothing, he smiled, and it was not a kind smile. She was simply the first person in that hall to say something true. Silence. Sorrel's hands were shaking, and she was not frightened. She was furious. Because it was a lie. She had been to the bottom of herself 15 times, on her knees, on the cold stone, in front of the entire mountain, and there was nothing there. A whole life of nothing does not become something because a beautiful man says so in a warm voice. He was lying. He knew he was lying. And he stood there and did it anyway. The only question was why. Majesty, said Corwin. He had gone the color of ash. Forgive me. If she were anything, I would have found it. I have called her 15 times with my own 2 hands. Yes, said Lucan. I have been thinking about that a very great deal as well. Leave us, the king said. Corwin hesitated. Then he bowed and went, and the latch clicked. And Sorrel was alone with the man she had insulted in front of 400 people. She stood up. Her knees were not entirely her own. Majesty. I would rather be sent to the waste than be made a fool of by a king. So say it plainly. What do you want from me? You are terribly serious in the mornings, he observed. Majesty, dusk, he said. I will send somebody for you, and we will eat. And you will tell me everything you know about the rolls of this mountain, which I suspect is a very great deal, and which I suspect nobody has ever once thought to ask you. He went to the door. Wear what you like, though I am told it is customary to make an effort. I am not going to marry you. No, he agreed cheerfully. Almost certainly not. And then he paused at the threshold, with his hand on the frame, and he did not turn around, and he asked one more question in an idle voice, as though it had only just occurred to him. Keeper all 15 of your callings. Who laid his hand on your brow? Sorrel blinked. The right master, she said. Corwin. He has done every calling in this mountain for 30 years. Said the king. And he went out, and the door closed, and Sorrel stood alone in the little gray room, with her heart going hard, and the taste of bitter green tonic still sitting at the back of her tongue. They sent a girl for her at dusk with a comb and an expression of profound professional despair. Sorrel did not own a gown. She owned 3 sets of clerk's gray and a coat that had belonged to a dead man. And she said so, and the girl went away and came back with something the color of wet slate that had been made for somebody taller. Sorrel put it on and looked at herself in the black window of the archive, and thought she looked like a heron wearing a curtain. She was still thinking it when she walked into the little east room, and Lucan looked up. He rose and pulled out the chair opposite him himself, which no king had ever done for anybody in the history of Ashcairn, and Sorrel sat down in it with the stiff care of a woman who suspects a trap in the joinery. There was a jug, and he reached for it, and she said no. I have had my life's allowance of wine. Majesty last night, all at once. Ah, he set the jug down with great ceremony. Water for the keeper. Very wise. Tell me about the rolls, he said. That she had not expected. He did not want to be entertained. He wanted the rolls, and he wanted them properly. And when she gave him the short answer, the one she gave visiting lords, he stopped her with 2 fingers on the table and said, "No, the real one." So she gave him the real one. She talked for an hour and could not stop because the man across the table was asking the next question before she had finished answering the last. And nobody in 26 years had ever asked her a second question about her work. "You are enjoying yourself," she accused. "I am having the best evening I have had in 11 years, said Lucan. "Do not tell my counsel. They spent a great deal of money on the last one. I was crowned at 19. He turned his cup on the wood. "There is a great deal of ceremony in it, and very little conversation." She meant to leave it there. She did not. "Why are you here?" "Because the rolls of Ashcairn are the finest kept in the north," said Lucan, "and I wish to see them." "That is a lie. It is a very good lie. I have been working on it since Vero." He looked up, and for half a breath the ease was simply gone, and what sat behind it was tired and hard and old. Then it came back, seamlessly, like a shutter going down. "Show me the rolls, keeper, since we are both being so honest." So she took him into the archive and lit the long lamp and pulled down 20 years of the calling. It took him 4 minutes to find it. 41 names. "In the year of the Black Frost," he said. 39 of them, out of the high houses and the low houses, have 4 times the children. Sorrel stood with her hand flat on the open page and felt the floor of her own life tip very slightly. "You are saying that my drunken arithmetic was right." "I am saying," said Lucan, "that you were the first person in that hall with the bad manners to do it out loud." He turned a page. "Somebody in this mountain is stealing wolves. And they have been doing it for a very long time, and doing it well enough that 400 people have watched it happen every winter of their lives, and called it the will of the blood." "To whom?" said Sorrel. He did not answer that because there was no answer to it, and they both knew there was no answer to it, and the silence sat there being true. "Show me your own," he said instead. "All 15. You wrote them yourself, did you not?" "I did." She hesitated. "It is not interesting. Humor me." So, she pulled the years down and laid them open along the long table, and there it was in her own hand, 15 times over. Sorrel of the archive called, and not answered. The letters got better as the years went on. That was the only thing that changed. The first year her hand had shaken so badly that Corwin had had to steady her wrist. By 20, she wrote it out like a list for the market. She looked up and found that Lucan was not reading the pages at all. He was looking at her. "What?" she said too sharply. "Nothing." He looked back down, and then, in a voice with something new underneath it, "Keeper, in all, 15. Did you drink anything Corwin gave you?" The archive was very quiet. "He gives me a tonic," she said slowly. "He has given it to me since I was 9 years old. For my nerves. It is bitter, and it is green, and it is disgusting, and he makes it himself." Her voice went strange and thin. "He gave me one this morning. He has given me one before, every calling I have ever knelt at." She stopped. "Majesty!" "What are you asking me?" And Lucan, of Vero, who had an answer for everything, opened his mouth and did not say anything at all. He did not answer her. He looked at her across a table of open ledgers with something in his face that she could not name, and he chose, deliberately, to say nothing at all. "It is late," he said. "Walk me back, Majesty. Walk me back, Sorrel." It was the first time he had used her name. She noticed that she noticed, and was annoyed about it, and walked him back. The upper cloister ran open on one side to the mountain, and at that hour there was nobody about but the two of them. "Why will you not answer me?" she said. "About the tonic." "Because I do not know yet," he said. "And because you love him." The cold came up the cloister. "Do not," Sorrel said. Her voice had gone flat. "Do not stand there and be clever at me about the only man who ever—" She heard it, under her own voice, off to the left, where the shadows lay thick beneath the buttress, a scrape, stone on leather. "Majesty," she said very quietly, "do not move." "Whatever for?" said Lucan, at completely normal volume. "Have you gone all tense?" Is this the part where you confess that you find me irresist? She hit him. She got a fistful of his coat and put her whole weight behind it and dragged him sideways and down, and the bolt went through the air, where his head had been, and struck the pillar with a crack like a bone breaking. They came out of the dark, all at once. 3 of them, faces wrapped, blades already out, and Sorrel had a single heartbeat in which to think that men do not wrap their faces, unless they intend to still be alive tomorrow, and then the first one was on her. She went low. She took his knee out with the side of her boot, and he came down, and she took the blade off him on the way, because a folly man opens his hand, and every child on the waste road knows it. The second, she did not see until he was on her back. She drove her head backward into him, and he lost his grip and reeled away, and she was already turning. The third went past her. Straight past her. At Lucan. Blade up. Sorrel did not think. She threw herself across the flags, and got a hand into the man's collar, and hauled, and the blade came round and caught her forearm, and she did not feel it at all, and she took him down onto the stone, and bent his wrist back until the blade came out of his hand. The 2 still standing broke off as one, and were gone through the arch, and they did not panic, and they did not scatter. They went the way soldiers go when a man has already told them where to meet. Sorrel held her crouch with the stolen blade up, and her breath sawing, and her arm burning, and nothing moved, and nothing moved, and nothing moved. "Well," said Lucan, from the ground, dusting his sleeve, "you certainly know how to show a man a memorable evening." He was smiling at her, easily, warmly, the way a man smiles at the end of a pleasant dinner party. And Sorrel, with the whole fight still shaking in her hands, felt something cold go all the way down her spine. "You are not surprised," she said. "I am extremely surprised. I am beside myself." "You are not?" She stood. She was shaking now, and it was not fear. 3 men just came for you, with their faces wrapped in the mountain of your own ally, and you have not once asked who they were, or why, or how they got in. You made a joke while there was a bolt in the pillar. The smile did not go anywhere. That was the horrifying part. It sat on his face, exactly where it had been, and simply stopped meaning anything at all. "You are bleeding," he said gently. "Answer me. How many times?" He did not answer. "How many times?" "Lucan." And he looked at her, and for half a second, something real came up behind the gray of his eyes, like a body coming up under ice, and she saw it, because she was near enough to see it, and it was not fear. It was exhaustion. "4," he said. Then he took the blade out of her hand and set it down, and he tore his own sleeve off at the shoulder and bound her arm with it, and he did it well, with the quick, sure fingers of a man who had bound a great many wounds, and he did not say another word while he did it. "Kings do not bind wounds," she said. "This one does." He pulled the knot down with his teeth and did not look up. "I was not born to it, you know the crown. There was a brother. Everybody has forgotten him, which I suppose is the point of the whole arrangement." He turned her arm over and checked the other side. "He was 14. I was 9. And I have bound a very great many wounds since then, and never once been quick enough, and it is the only skill I have that I did not want." The wind came down off the snowfields, and went through the cloister, and did not stop. "4 times," she said. "And you came to Ashcairn anyway, 3 days early, alone, without your guard." She watched his hands. "And the first thing you did was put a hood on and sit down at a table full of clerks." Lucan's fingers went still on the knot. "Yes," he said. "You were not passing through." "No, Majesty." Her voice was very quiet. "What did you come here hunting?" And Lucan Navarro finished the knot, and stood, and gave her his hand to help her rise, and did not answer that either. She took the hand. She was not frightened of him. She should have been. He was a liar and a king, and there were men in this mountain who wanted him dead, and she had no idea what he was. And in 26 years, she had never once been so interested in anybody. He did not go back to Vero. That was the thing that undid her, because he had every reason in the world to go. 4 attempts on his life, a council screaming for him, a mountain full of witnesses to the fact that a drunk clerk had insulted him in public and got away with it. He stayed. He stayed for a month, and Sorrel spent that month doing the only thing she had ever been any good at, which was reading, and the text she read was him. He came to the archive every morning with his hair wet from the wall, and sat on the corner of her table, which she had asked him not to do 11 times, and read the rolls with her, and he was good at it. That was the unforgivable thing. He found her on the east stair at the cold end of a night watch, with 2 cups of something hot, and when he handed hers over, his fingers went across the backs of hers, and her whole arm lit up to the shoulder. "You are not looking at the mountain," he murmured. "It is a mountain. It has been there some time. It is rather outshone tonight," said Lucan, and he was looking at her, openly, taking his slow, unhurried time about it, the way he looked at a page he intended to read twice, and he smiled into his own drink like a man who had won something, and let her stew. And then there was the other thing. The thing she did not write down. It had started in the cloister, and it had not stopped. A pressure, low and constant, and underneath everything, like a stone dropped into a well, so deep you never hear it land. When he came into the archive, it got worse. When he touched her, even the back of her hand, it turned over. Sorrel dropped the ledger and stood in the middle of the archive, with terror going through her like cold water. Because there was nothing in her. There had never been anything in her. She had written the word herself, in her own good hand, 15 times over, hollow. If there was something in her now, then either she was going mad, or the king was right. And if the king was right, then Corwin had laid his hand on her brow 15 times and called her hollow to 400 people, and Corwin had made her a cup of bitter green tonic every single year before he did it. She got as far as the door of the archive. She stood with her hand on the latch for a long time. Then she took her hand off the latch and went back to her desk and sat down. Because Corwin had pulled her out of the snow when she was 9 years old. Because Corwin had taught her the letters she had built her entire life out of. Because you cannot open a door like that and then close it again. And because she was a coward. And because she knew exactly what she was going to find on the other side of it. And because she could not bear it. That night, Lucan came to the archive after the last bell. No ledgers, no questions about the rolls. He shut the door and sat down on the bench across from her, and he simply looked at her, and Sorrel put her pen down very carefully, because her hands had begun to shake. "What do you want?" she said. It came out raw. "Majesty, I am asking you plainly, and I am at the end of what I can carry. Every day you come in here, and you will not say what you are after, and you will not leave me be, and I—" Her voice cracked straight down the middle. "Tell me it is a scheme. Tell me you need a clerk you can trust, or a witness, or a knife. Tell me anything at all that makes sense, because I am not built to want things I cannot have. And you are making me want." She stopped. Too late. Lucan did not move. "Want what?" he said, very low. There was nothing playful in it at all. "Do not," she whispered. "You know what? You have known for weeks. You have been enjoying it." He stood up. He came around the end of the bench slowly, the way a man approaches something that might bolt, and he stopped an arm's length from her, and put his hands where she could see them, and Sorrel had to tip her chin back to hold his eyes. "What if I simply want you?" he said. "Men like you do not want women like me." It came out as nothing, as breath, and she was staring at his mouth, and she knew that he could see her doing it. "You do not believe me," he said softly. "No." "Then tell me to stop." He did not come any closer. "Say the word, and I will walk out of that door tonight and never trouble you again, and I will not hold it against you. Not for 1 hour. Not ever." The archive was very quiet. Her pulse was very loud. "Or," said Lucan, "ask me to prove it." And Sorrel of Ashcairn Hollow looked up at the Alpha King of Vero and heard her own voice say it. Prove it. He crossed the archive in 2 strides, and he kissed her. And every careful thing in Sorrel's head went white and silent, all at once. His hand slid into her hair. His mouth was warm and certain and thorough. And there was no hall watching, no 400 people holding their breath, no stone under her knees. There was only the lamp and the smell of old paper and the sudden total overwhelming fact of him. And then her nose caught up with the rest of her, and what it found wrecked her, because she could smell him. Not leather and cold air and ink. Him. The wanting coming off him in a dark rolling wave, unmistakable and absolutely helpless, and it folded her resistance in half. Lucan, she said. I do not know how to. Neither do I, he said against her jaw, and he was smiling. She could feel him smiling. I have been perfectly awful at this from the first hour, and I have no intention whatsoever of improving. Sorrel had been useful. She had been tolerated. She had been pitied by kind people and mocked by unkind ones and written down in her own hand as empty. She had never once stood in the path of another person's plain, undefended wanting, and had it aimed at her. It made her believe him. She got both hands into his collar and dragged him down. Sorrel, he said, ragged. She pulled back just far enough to see his face. I am sure, she said. He put out the lamp, and the great archive of Ashcairn, which had held every name in the mountain, and never once held hers, held her instead, in the dark, and the wind went over the roof, and nobody in the world knew where either of them were. Long afterward, she lay with her head on his chest, and listened to his heart, and did not sleep. You have gone quiet, he said into her hair. There is something inside me, she said. His hand stopped. It started in the cloister. When the blade came for you, it came up out of nothing, and it turned over, and it has not gone away since. It moves when you come into a room. It moved tonight. She swallowed. Majesty, I have been to the bottom of myself 15 times, on my knees, in front of everybody I have ever known. There is nothing there. So either I am running mad, or, she could not finish it. Or you were never hollow, said Lucan quietly, and something has been sitting on her for 17 years, and she is tired of it. Sorrel began, silently and helplessly, to cry. I want you to hear me, he said at last, because I am going to ask you for something, and it is the worst thing I have ever asked anybody for. Ask. Do not drink the tonic. The wind went over the roof. He gives it to me every morning. He has given it to me every morning since I was 9 years old, and he pulled me out of the snow, and he watches me drink it, and he asks after my nerves. Her voice had begun to shake again. You are asking me to lie to Corwin. Yes. Why do you not simply arrest him? And Lucan laughed, but there was no shape to it at all. Because I have nothing. Because he is the right master of Ashcairn, and this mountain would burn for him. Because a king who takes a man on a suspicion is only a tyrant with better manners, and because, he stopped, and because, if I am wrong, Sorrel, then I will have taken from you the one person in the world who never left you. And I would rather be shot at 4 more times than be the one who does that to you on a guess. She lay very still. You are frightened, she said. I am the Alpha King of Vero, said Lucan into the dark. I have been frightened since I was 19 years old. I simply have a very good face. And Sorrel turned over, and put her hand on that face, and found it wet. The midwinter sitting came 10 days later, and for the first time in her life, Sorrel of Ashcairn walked into the great hall through the wide doors, and the horn went, and 400 wolves turned around. It should have been the finest hour of her life. It was ruined, entirely, by the fact that she could smell every single person in the room. 10 days without the bitter green cup, and the world had begun coming in through her nose. Wet wool. Iron. Somebody's fear at the far end of a corridor. The mountain itself, which apparently had a smell, and had always had a smell, and had been quietly having it at her for 26 years, without her once knowing. "You look," said Lucan when she reached him, "like the end of an argument." "I look like a heron in a curtain." "You look like mine," he said, and tucked her hand into the crook of his arm before she could answer. "And I intend to walk you the entire length of this hall so that every man in it can watch me do it." Later, when the tables had been pushed back, and the hall had gone loud, he took her out onto the north gallery where the music thinned and the cold came in off the snowfields. "You hate this," she said. "Hate is a strong word. You are lying." He laughed, surprised, and turned to look at her, and the charm went out of his face the way a lamp goes out, and what was left underneath it looked exhausted. "I have been doing this since I was 19, he said. "The smiling, the being what 400 people need me to be, so that they do not look too closely at what I am not. And I cannot decide whether that makes me clever or whether it makes me." He stopped. "Or what?" said Sorrel. "Nothing. Ignore me." He smiled. It was thin and offensive, and it was the worst thing she had ever seen on a human face. "Lucan," she put her hand on his face. His breath caught. The false smile fell straight off him and did not come back. "They think you are a marvel," she said quietly. "The wolf who came at 11. The alpha nobody can lie to. Do you know what I think? I think you are a man who has been alone, in a room full of people for 11 years. I think you are so tired that you can hardly stand up, and I think you came to my mountain 3 days early and put a hood on, so that for one single evening you could sit at a table and have nobody bow." He did not move. "And the man under it," she said. "The one who reads ledgers and makes appalling jokes while people are shooting at him. I like him a very great deal. That is all. That is the whole of it." "Sorrel?" he said, and his voice had gone to pieces, and he kissed her. It was not like the archive. The archive had been heat and want and the dark. This was something else entirely, and Sorrel felt the whole world tip sideways, because it was not coming from her relief. Fear, a grief so old that it had gone soft at the edges. And underneath all of it, pouring through the place where they touched, like water finding a crack, a great helpless flood of tenderness that was not hers, that had never been hers, that belonged to somebody else and was somehow impossibly inside her chest. She could feel him. Sorrel wrenched back with a gasp. "Did you?" he said. "Sorrel, did you feel?" Her heart was going so hard that she thought the whole gallery must hear it. Because it was not possible. A bond does not open between a wolf and an absence. It is not in the law, and it is not in the rolls, and she had written every rule of it out in her own hand, and if it had happened, then she was not hollow. And if she was not hollow, then every kind hand Corwin had ever laid on her brow had been a lie, and the man who saved her life at 9 years old had spent 17 years holding her under the water. "It was nothing," she heard herself say. Lucan went absolutely still. "Nothing," he repeated. "It was a kiss." Her voice came out flat and cold and horrible, and she could not stop it, and she watched it land. Do not make it into something. For a moment he did not move at all. Then he stepped back, and he put the smile on. The courtly one. The one he wore for men, he intended never to trust with anything. "Of course," he said pleasantly. "You are quite right. Probably nothing at all." And Sorrel stood on the north gallery of Ashcairn with her whole soul roaring, and understood that she had just done to him exactly what the mountain had spent her entire life doing to her. She had looked at something true, and she had called it empty. The gift came up the hall on a bier of black wood, carried by 4 men of Ostmark, and the horn went for it, and the whole mountain rose. It was a cloak, a great grey wolf pelt, winter thick. Halvard of Ostmark made a pretty speech about the long friendship of the 2 realms, and the hall beat the tables, and Lucan came down from the high seat to accept it, because that is what a king does. And then the wind came down the hall from the open doors, and it brought the cloak to Sorrel, The hall went up in a roar. "Do not touch it," she got out. "Majesty, on my life, do not put your hand on that fur." "She is mad," said Halvard of Ostmark, gone grey. "Let her go," said Lucan. "Majesty, she has laid hands on." "Let her go." They let her go. Sorrel came down onto her knees beside the bier, with her heart tearing, and she put her face close to the pelt, close enough to feel the guard hairs against her cheek. And she breathed in, and there it was. Under the tanning oil and the smoke and the cold, thin and sweet and wrong, a smell like crushed leaves and bitter almonds that made the back of her own throat close. She had smelled it before. "Ashroot," she said. The word went out into a silent hall. "It is combed into the pelt," she said. "The whole of the shoulder. It goes through the skin. It does not need to be drunk. Enough of it, and an alpha would not wake at all." Halvard of Ostmark had gone the color of tallow, and Corwin, the right master of Ashcairn, was standing at the high table with his hands flat on the wood, looking down at her, and his face was doing something she had never seen it do before, and that she would think about for the rest of her life. He looked at her the way a man looks at a dog that has begun to speak. "Clear the hall," said Lucan. And within the hour, in the little grey room, with the door shut and the fire down, she stood in front of the king of Vero and said, "You will take that cloak and put it in front of the houses and tell them the whole of it, tonight, before that man has time to draw breath." "No," said Lucan. "No. They know there was poison. 400 of them watched you find it. What they do not know," he said, "is that the pelt came into this mountain clean." She stopped. He turned around from the window. "Ostmark bought that cloak in good faith. It was combed in the last 4 days. Here, by a hand that lives on this rock and eats at that table. And if I put that in front of the houses tonight, Halvard is dead before dawn, and there is an army on the Vero road by spring, and the man who actually did it will be standing in my hall with a sorrowful face, telling everybody how sad it all is." His jaw set. "So that is the thing you will not say. Not to the houses, not to the envoy, not to your friends, not to the right master. Let the whole mountain go on believing it came up the road from somewhere else. Let him believe he is still invisible, and then what?" "And then I watch him," said Lucan. "And I wait." "You wait." Sorrel was shaking. "This is the 5th time. You are going to wait until somebody is good at it." "Probably," he agreed. She wanted to hit him. "You saved my life tonight," he said. "You saved it with something that did not exist in you 3 weeks ago, and every soul in that hall watched you do it. And I have never in my life been so frightened and so proud at the same moment." His thumb moved once against her collarbone. "Now, trust me. Let me handle this in my own way. Can you give me that, tonight, without asking me why?" Every part of Sorrel that had ever read a ledger said no. But she could still feel the ghost of him against her ribs, the tenderness that was not hers, and she had thrown it back in his face on the gallery and watched the light go out of him. And she was a coward, and she could not bear to do it twice in one night. "All right," she said. "I promise." "Wait for me here," he said, and kissed her forehead, and the door closed behind him. He went down. 2 flights past the archive. He stopped at the right master's door, and opened it, and went in. Sorrel crossed to the door, and put her hand flat on the wood, and pushed. Lucan of Vero was behind Corwin's desk. The drawers were out. There was a shielded lamp in one fist, and a sheaf of papers in the other, and he was reading them fast the way he read everything. He looked up. For a long, airless moment, neither of them moved. "Sorrel," he said. His voice was very calm and very steady. "This is not what it looks like. Somebody tried to kill you tonight," Sorrel said. Her voice came out level, which surprised her. "You told me to say nothing. And then you came straight down here in the dark, alone, to go through the private papers of the man who raised me." She was gripping the doorframe. "So say it plainly, Majesty. What are you doing in this room?" He set the papers down. "I have been investigating Corwin," he said, "for 2 years. "Corwin," she said. Who pulled me out of the snow? Yes. Then say the rest of it. Ashroot grows in 4 valleys in the world, and one of them belongs to House Drennan, and Drennan has been buying it in quantities that would poison an army, and shipping it here. For 30 years, it quiets the blood. A grown wolf will not notice a cup of it. A child will never come into her wolf at all. He did not look away from her. Every calling in this mountain for 30 years has passed through Corwin's hands. Every foundling, every tanner's son, every child with no house behind them to ask questions. And the wolves that come are the wolves of the great houses. And the great houses sit at the sitting, and the sitting elects the marchwardens. And Drennan holds them. The floor came up under Sorrel. No, she said. You are wrong. She could hear her own voice climbing. You do not know him. You have been in this mountain 5 weeks, and I've been in it 17 years, and I am telling you that you are wrong. Read them, he said, and held the papers out. Read them yourself. It is his hand, and it is your language, and you are the only person alive who can. She did not take them, because Corwin was the one thing in her entire life that had never once been a lie. And underneath the roaring of not Corwin, never Corwin, something cold and quiet began to assemble itself. She heard her own voice say, from very far away, you needed somebody close to him. Lucan stopped breathing. You needed somebody inside this mountain who could read his hand, somebody he trusted absolutely, and that nobody else looked at twice. She lifted her head. You needed the keeper of the rolls. And you had been hunting for a way to get at me for weeks, and you could not find one, because I am a clerk, and I never leave this mountain, and nobody has ever spoken to me, at all. She could not seem to feel her own face. And then, a drunk woman got up on a table, in front of 400 people, and handed you one. Say that I am wrong, she whispered. Lucan, say that I am wrong. He looked at her for a long moment, and she watched him hunt for the words, and she watched him fail to find any. And he did not say that she was wrong. Sorrel pressed both hands over her mouth. All of it, she said. It was all a lie. Not all of it. Why did you not simply ask me? If you suspected him, why not put it in front of me, and let me look at it? Because I did not think you would believe me, said Lucan, and it hit her like an open hand, because it was not wrong. I thought that if I put it to you plainly, you would go straight to him. Not out of malice, out of love. You would go to him and say, the king says these things about you. Tell me they are not true. And he would have looked at you with those sad, kind eyes and told you they were not true. And you would have believed him. And then he would have known that I was coming. He set the papers down, and you would have been dead within the month. And I would rather you hated me for the rest of my life than that. That was not your choice to make. No, he agreed. It was not. There is something else, said Lucan. I do not want anything else. Yes, you do. Because you are the only person in this mountain who cannot be lied to for very long, and I would rather you heard it from me tonight than worked it out on your own in a year. The night in the hall when you got up on the table, you said the great houses take everything, and the low houses take nothing, and the man saying, the poem knows perfectly well who is watching. He tilted his head. Was that yours, Sorrel? Did you build that yourself, out of your ledgers, at your desk, in the dark? She opened her mouth, and she could hear it perfectly. Corwin, sitting on the end of her table, with his hands folded, tired and sad and kind. The blood favors the fed, child. It has never been fair. I have kept these rolls for 30 years, and I will tell you what they say. The poor are hungry, and the hungry are quiet, and the quiet are never called. She had carried it out of that room in her own mouth for 17 years, and never once noticed that it was not hers. He had built her rage for her. Sorrel put her back against the corridor wall and slid slowly down it. He made me, she said. Yes, everything I think. Everything I am angry about. She was crying and she did not care. It was never mine. He wrote me, Lucan. He wrote me the way I write the roles. No, said Lucan. He crouched down in front of her, and he did not touch her. He wrote what you were angry about. He did not write the anger. Nobody gave you that. You got up on that table with your whole life on the line, and 400 people staring at you, and you said a true thing in front of the one man in the world who could have hanged you for it. He paused. Half my court believes exactly what you said. Not one of them would ever say it to my face. You did it in a borrowed voice, and you did it drunk, and you did it anyway. And that is the only reason I am not dead in a ditch tonight. Sorrel wiped her face with the heel of her hand. Then she stood up. You looked me in the eye, she said. For 5 weeks. Yes. You let me tell you what I was frightened of. I let you further in than anybody has ever been. And in the whole of it, you never once told me the truth. Her voice was very quiet. You could not trust me with the one thing that was actually about me. My life. My blood. My 17 years. You could have had anything of mine that you asked for, and you took it without asking, because it was easier. Lucan of Vero stood in the dark corridor of a mountain that hated him, and did not have a single word. Good night, Majesty, said Sorrel, and she walked away. She did not get 20 paces. Sorrel? His voice came out of the dark at the end of the corridor, quiet and warm and entirely familiar, and every muscle in her body went loose with relief before her mind had a chance to catch up with it. Corwin was standing by the chapel arch, exactly as he had stood every day of her life. Child. His hands came down on her shoulders. You are white as bone. What has happened? And because it hurt too much to hold, she told him. That it had been a lie. That the king had never wanted her. That she had been away into the mountain and nothing else. He gathered her in and held her, and she stood in the corridor and shook. I know, he said gently. I had hoped to spare you this. I have known since the night of the feast. You knew? I did not know how to tell you. He stroked her hair. But there is worse, Sorrel. Come with me. Sit down. And listen to me, and hold on to me while I say it. Because it will not be easy to hear. And he told her that the ash root came up the Vero road under the king's own seal. That the king had been bleeding the low houses of their wolves for the whole of his reign. That the assassins in the cloister had been the king's own, staged so that she would trust him. That the poison she had drunk every morning of her life had been ordered by the man who told her she was not hollow. He said it kindly, with tears standing in his eyes, holding both of her hands in his own. And Sorrel listened, and thought, in a small, clear voice, at the very back of her own head, that was somehow perfectly calm. 11 years. He had said the whole of the king's reign. He had said 11 years. The great doors opened. 400 faces turned, and Lucan, alone at the high seat, looked up as she came through the door. For half a heartbeat, his whole face lit. Then he saw who she had walked in with, and the light went out of it, and he sat back and made himself ready to die. My lords, said Corwin. He did not raise his voice. He had never needed to. It grieves me beyond speech to bring this before you, but the poison in that cloak did not come from Ostmark. The hall began to roar. He lifted one hand and it stopped. There is ash root in this mountain. There has been for 11 years. It comes up the Vero road in crates under the king's own seal, and it is fed to the children of the low houses, and it is why they do not come into their wolves, and it is why the great houses do. He turned and held out his hand to her, and his face was full of sorrow. I have kept my silence out of cowardice. I will not keep it another hour. But do not take it from me. Ask her, said Corwin gently. Ask the woman he came here to marry. Ask the keeper of the rolls. Sorrel stepped forward into the silence. The right master is lying to you, she said. Corwin's head came round so fast that she heard his neck. He says the ash root has been in this mountain for 11 years, said Sorrel, and her voice went up into the vault, clear and flat and precise. The voice of a woman reading out a column of figures. It has been here for at least 17. I know, because he has been putting it into my hand every morning since I was 9 years old, and I drank it in front of 400 of you at 15 callings, and every one of you watched me kneel, and every one of you watched me fail." She lifted her chin. 17 years ago, King Lucan was 13. He held no seal. He had no crates. He was a boy in another mountain, and he did not come to the throne for another 6 winters. "So, either the king of Vero was poisoning me before he was old enough to shave," she said, "or the right master of Ashcairn has just stood up in front of you and given you the date of his own crime, and got it wrong by 6 years, because it did not occur to him that anybody in this hall could count." "She is distraught," said Corwin. "She is a poor creature, my lords. She has been used cruelly, and she does not." "Then search his stores," said Sorrel. Corwin stopped. "He keeps a ledger," she said, "to the whole hall, to Halvard, to the houses, to the mountain. It is in the second press, in the false back, and it is in his own hand, and it is written in the shorthand of the rolls of Ashcairn, and there are precisely 2 people alive who can read it." She turned and looked at him. "He taught me himself. He told me that a woman who can write is never powerless." "A search costs you nothing," said Halvard of Ostmark quietly, "if there is nothing in it." And Corwin's face changed. The grave, kind, sorrowful old wolf simply went out of it, like a lamp carried into another room, and what was left standing in the middle of the great hall was a cornered animal. He came at her fast. She saw the knife slide out of his sleeve half a beat before he reached her, and it did not matter, because this was the one thing in the whole ruinous night that Sorrel of Ashcairn actually knew how to do. She turned into him. She took the knife arm at the wrist, and she wrenched and she put his own weight through his own shoulder and down. And 30 years, and 400 names a year, and 17 winters of a warm hand on her brow, went down onto the flagstones of the great hall, with her knee between his shoulders. It came up the way it had come up on the table, only there was no wine in her now, and no floor to catch her, and this time it came all the way, roaring, up through her chest, and out the lamps blew out, all of them. The whole length of the hall, at once, as though something enormous had drawn breath. 400 wolves went down onto their knees, and they did not do it out of courtesy. Sorrel knelt in the darkness above the man who had raised her, with her hand around his wrist, and her own heart roaring in her ears, and something vast and golden standing up inside her at last, 17 years late, and she leaned down close to his ear. "You taught me to count," she said. And then the guards had him, and they hauled him up, and they dragged him out. She did not look at Lucan. She would not. But he came down off the dais anyway, through the kneeling hall, and stopped in front of her, and he was looking at her as though he had never seen her before in his life. "Sorrel," he said. He was hoarse. "Your wolf, I know. You saved my life after everything, after what I did to you, you still." "I came to stop a traitor," said Sorrel. He flinched. "That is all," she said. "It was not forgiveness. Not 1 second of it was forgiveness." He reached for her, and stopped himself, and put his hand down. "It is real. The thing on the gallery. You felt it, and you are feeling it now, and I can." "It does not matter whether it is real," she said. "You looked me in the eye for 5 weeks, and used me. A bond does not undo that. It only means that I do not even get to walk away clean." His face fell open. "I love you," said Lucan of Vero, in front of 400 people. "I know," said Sorrel. "That is the worst part." And she walked out of the great hall of Ashcairn, through the kneeling wolves, past the arch where the king's carving looked down at nothing at all, and she did not stop, and she did not look back. They made her right master of Ashcairn in the spring, and she was good at it, and she had always known that she would be. The mountain was a different place. Corwin sat in a cell beneath the old fort, and the rot he had worked into the rolls for 30 years was cut out clean. Drennan fell. 4 of the great families went down with it. The crown paid for all of it in gold and in blood, and the king of Vero stood in the middle of it, and never once put the blame on anybody smaller than himself. And the mountain, slowly and against its will, began to love him for it. And in the summer, Sorrel called the wolves, she called the tanner's boy, and the herder's girl, and the foundling with no name at all who had come down the waste road with her feet wrapped in sacking. And Sorrel laid her hand on that child's brow with her heart going like a hammer, and something came up out of the dark under those small ribs and stood, and the great hall came apart at the seams. That was the best hour of her life. Lucan wrote to her, 2 and 3 a week, all the way through the summer, in his own hand, which was terrible. Some ran for pages, and were mostly about him being wrong. Some were 4 lines about a pension dispute in the Western March, asking her plainly, and without any pretense at all, what she thought, and whether he was being an idiot about it, as though her judgment were still a thing he wanted to spend. She answered the pension dispute. She did not answer any of the rest. I keep writing the same word 100 different ways, he wrote once. Sorry. It is a small, stupid word, and it will not carry what I did, and I do not have a bigger one, so I am simply going to keep sending this one until I run out of paper, and once, very short. I do not want you back because you are useful. I have 100 useful people. I want you back because none of it means anything if I cannot tell you about it afterward. Nev had opinions. Good, she said, in the early weeks. Let him rot. By the 4th month, the line had moved. He sent up the whole of the back pay, said Bram one evening, prodding the fire. 11 years of it, and he has written you what? 40 letters? 40 and 3, said Neve, who had apparently been counting. By the 6th month they had given up subtlety. Entirely. Right, master, said Neve. With respect, talk to the man. You are miserable. He is miserable, and the rest of us have to stand here in the middle of it and watch. Sorrel set down her pen. I was used, she said. I am not going to queue up for another turn, and she went back to the rolls. And, behind her ribs, the great golden animal that had waited 17 years to be let out, lay down and put its head on its paws, and looked, patiently, and without any comment whatsoever, north, toward Vero. The letter that came in the 8th month was different. Sorrel, I am sorry. You deserved better than me, and I think you always did. You have made yourself clear more times than I had any right to ask, and I am going to respect it now. I will stop. Be well. Be the terror of that mountain. I am glad to have known you. She read it twice. Then she folded it and put it with the others. In the box, in the second press, in the false back, where nobody would ever find it. This was what she had wanted. She had wanted him to stop. So, she could not think, sitting there in the cold, with her hands flat on the desk. Why, it felt exactly like being 9 years old in the snow again, watching the last light go out in the last window on the mountain. He kept his word. No letters, no flowers. When he came up for the autumn sitting, he was perfectly courteous. He said, "Right, master," and inclined his head and moved on. And he was not cold. He was never cold. He was simply done. And on the 3rd night of the sitting, Nev came into her office with Bram at her shoulder, and both of them had gone the particular gray color of people who have made an enormous mistake. What? Said Sorrel slowly. He is gone, said Neve. Gone, Sorrel repeated. Off the mountain. Not in his chambers, not in the hall, not with the horses. Bram's voice went up in the middle. Nobody has seen him since the 10th bell. Trackers, she said. No horn, no bell. If this mountain wakes up and finds it has lost the king of Vero, there will be a war before breakfast. She was already pulling on her coat. Every gate. Move. They moved. No horse gone. His sword on its stand, his rings on the table, the room neat and cold and empty. The trackers took the scent down to the low postern and lost it. And a trail stops like that for exactly 2 reasons. Because a man is being careful. Or because a man is being carried. Sorrel stood in the yard with the wind coming down off the snowfields and cutting through her, and she knew what she had to do, and she had known it from the moment Nev opened the door. There was one way in the world to find him. She had kept it shut for 8 months. She had wrapped it and starved it, and refused to look at it because a bond left open deepens, and a bond that deepens sets. And she had told herself every single night that if she simply left it alone for long enough, it would wither and let her go. She opened it, and it hit her like a door blown off its hinges in a storm. Grief first, deep, and old, and bottomless. Then, loneliness. Then a fear that was not the fear of dying, but the fear of being seen, which she had always known, which was the whole of him. And underneath all of it, slow, and swimming, and drifting. Thoughts coming loose and floating off like paper on water. He had been drugged. She was running, before she finished the thought, down through the low gate and into the undertown, following the pull of him like a rope, hauling her hand over hand through the dark. She came to the old hall, not the great hall. The first one. The low one. The one they had stopped using 40 years ago, and now used for storing hay and holding wakes, and there was light coming out of the door. She went through it low and fast, with a blade in her hand, ready for a body, ready for a knife, ready for the worst, and stopped. The king of Vero was standing on the table with a cup in his hand, addressing 400 empty benches, while an old man in a hall servant's apron stood beside a broom he had clearly given up on. And another thing, Lucan was saying. "Majesty," said the old man. "Another thing, Auger, and I want you to attend very closely to this, because it is the crux of it." He gestured with the cup and slopped a good deal of it down his own coat. She stood there, on this table. On this exact table, Auger, I have measured it, I have been about it some hours, and she said that the poem was no good. He beamed enormously at the dark. "Have you any idea what that is like? To sit in a hood, in a corner, and have somebody simply say the true thing out loud. Nobody has said a true thing to me since I was 19 years old. You have said that, Majesty." "Have I 4 times?" "Well," said Lucan, "it is a very good point." Sorrel lowered the blade. "Majesty," said Auger, with the desperation of a drowning man, "there is a woman." Lucan turned around, and his whole ruined, exhausted, miserable face cracked wide open into something so delighted that it hurt her to look at it. "Sorel," he breathed. "Get down," she said. "No. Lucan." He gestured expansively and very nearly went off the end of the table. "I have a superb view, and the acoustics, Sorel, are superb. You are drunk on a table in an empty hall, and the entire guard of Ashkern is out on that mountain in the dark, looking for your body." "Ah," said Lucan. "That is unfortunate. That is unfortunate. They will find me," he said reasonably. "Eventually." And he sat down heavily on the edge of the table and put his head in his hands. "I have been going to go back for some hours. There is a difficulty with the going back, which is that I keep not doing it." Sorel put the blade away. She came and stood in front of him, and she was shaking, and she could not have said with what. "I thought that you had been taken," she said. "I opened it. The bond. I have kept it shut for 8 months. And I opened it in the yard because I thought somebody had you." Her voice went. "And Lucan? What came through? How long have you felt like that?" Lucan of Vero looked at her for a long moment. "Since the gallery," he said. Silence, in the empty hall. "But you have to stop," Lucan said suddenly, and his head came up, and there was something raw and undefended in his face that she had only seen once before, on a gallery, in the cold. "That is the thing I came down here to say to an empty room, because I am not permitted to say it to you. You have to stop. Sorrel. You have your wolf, and you have your mountain, and you have every last thing they took from you, and you are still living like a woman, waiting for somebody to come and take it all back. Do not. You would rather strangle a thing that goes all the way down into your actual soul," he said, "than risk being hurt twice. You are a coward." "I am not a coward." "Prove it," said Lucan. And then he slid off the table and did not entirely manage the landing, and Sorrel caught him. He came into her, all warm, dead weight and disaster, and his face went into her shoulder, and he smelled of spirits and of cold air and of the things she had been refusing to think about for 8 months. "Marry me," he said into her collarbone. The world stopped. "What did you just say? Marry me." He pulled back to look at her, blurrily, and tried for dignified, and landed somewhere a great deal closer to pleading. "I dare you." "I am a wreck," said the Alpha King of Vero. "I am a wreck without you, and I have been one since the spring, and I will spend every day of the rest of my life making it up to you, and I do not care in the slightest how long it takes. I will ask you every morning. I will ask you until I am an old man." His eyes were sliding shut. "Marry me, please. I sensed you before anybody in the whole world sensed you, and I have not had one good hour since." "I will not ask again," he mumbled. "I said I would stop. I will stop. I am sorry. I will leave you be." "Ask me again tomorrow," said Sorrel. His eyes cracked open. "When you are sober," she said. "When you can remember having asked." "And you will say, 'Yes,'" he breathed. She opened her mouth to answer. And the King of Alvero passed out cold against her shoulder, his head heavy in the crook of her neck, his breath warm and even and smelling powerfully of spirits, while Odger, in the shadows, quietly went back to his sweeping. Sorrel stood in the old hall with the king in her arms, and felt herself smile for the first time in 8 months. She turned her head and put her mouth against his hair. "Ask me tomorrow," she said, "and find out." In the end, it took him 5 months of asking, every single morning, sober in every way that a man can be sober. And every day, Sorrel told him to ask her again tomorrow, until one perfectly ordinary morning, she looked up from the rolls at the man grinning hopefully at her over the top of a pension dispute, and she said yes. "You are stuck with me now," he murmured when it was done. "No taking it back." "Why would I take it back?" said Sorrel. "I am the one who got up on the table," he cried. During the vows, she had known that he would. She very nearly did not. He laughed and leaned in close to her ear in front of the whole mountain. "I have to tell you something," he said, "and you are going to be furious now." It seemed as good a moment as any. His hand tightened on hers. "That night, when I put my nose to your throat and told the hall I could not read you, you said you could not see the bottom of me." "That part was true," said Lucan. "What I never told them was why she went still." "An alpha cannot scent his own mate," he said quietly. "Not properly. Not for rank. Not for depth. Not for anything at all. Everything simply goes gold and stops making sense. I had known about it my whole life. I had never once believed it." He was smiling, and his eyes were wet. And then a furious clerk got up on a table and told 400 people that the poem was no good, and I put my face an inch from her throat, and the whole world went gold and stopped making sense, and I have not been the same man since. "You knew," said Sorrel. "That night, on the very first night, I knew, in one breath," said the Alpha King of Vero. "And I could not say it, because you were hollow and I was king, and every soul in that hall would have called me a liar or a fool, and whoever was holding you under would have had you dead before dawn. So I told them what I could not do, and I let them think that it was the whole of it." He kissed her knuckles. "I said that I could not read you. I never once said that I did not know what you were." Said Sorrel of Ashcairn, right master, keeper of the rolls, who had knelt 15 times and been found empty, stood in the great hall that she had once been carried out of, and looked at the man who had known her in a single breath, 17 years too late and exactly on time. "You are right," she said. "I am furious." And then she kissed him, and for once, she did not argue.